Imagine a heat so intense it feels less like a fever and more like a charcoal fire stoked inside your marrow. Your lymph nodes, usually invisible guardians of your immune system, begin to swell. They harden into agonizing, egg-sized lumps in your groin and armpits. They turn purple, then black, straining against the skin until they threaten to burst. You try to scream, but your tongue has swollen to fill your entire mouth, coated in a thick, white fur that slowly turns the color of ash. You are drowning in your own fluids, delirious with pain, while the world outside your window goes about its business in the golden sun of a California spring. This is not the Middle Ages. This is not a forgotten village in the 14th century. This is San Francisco, the glittering jewel of the American West. In the year 1900, and the killer that has just stepped off a steamship is the oldest, most efficient executioner in human history. The Black Death. But the true horror of this story isn't just the bacterium eating the victims from the inside out. The horror is the cage that the living built for the dying. To understand how a modern American city became a medieval dungeon, we have to look at the detectives of this era. At the turn of the 20th century, the medical community was at a crossroads. We had microscopes, we knew about bacteria, but the old ghosts of prejudice still haunted the halls of science. The authorities in San Francisco found the first victim, a man named Chick Jin, dead in the dark, damp basement of the Globe Hotel. When the autopsy revealed the telltale bacilli, the panic didn't lead to a rational medical response. It led to political warfare. The backdrop was the Geary Act. This was a federal law, a brutal extension of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which required all Chinese residents to carry papers or face hard labor and deportation. It codified the idea that this specific population was distinct, dangerous, and legally separate from the rest of humanity. So, when the plague arrived, the city's health officials didn't see a biological threat that required sanitation and rat control. They saw a racial problem. They believed the disease was a product of the people themselves, born of miasma and strange diets, rather than a microscopic invader. The detectives made a fatal calculation. They believed that if they simply drew a line around the people they feared, the disease would stop. They weaponized the Geary Act's sentiment. They didn't target the carrier, they targeted the victims. The Board of Health issued a quiet, terrifying order. They would not treat the patients. They would not evacuate the healthy. They would seal the district. You need to place yourself there. You are a resident of Chinatown in March of 1900. It starts with a sound, the rhythmic hammering of wood against wood. You look out your window to see police officers unfurling heavy coils of rope. They are stringing it across the intersections, tying it to lampposts. Then comes the barbed wire. It glints in the cold harbor fog. They are building a fence, not to keep people out, but to keep you in. The blockade is absolute. No food comes in, no doctors come in, and certainly, no one goes out. You stand at the boundary line, watching the white residents of San Francisco walking freely just 50 feet away, while a policeman taps his baton against his palm, daring you to cross. The psychological weight of it crushes you. You are trapped in a quarantine zone that includes 35,000 people squeezed into 12 city blocks. As the days pass, the sanitation breaks down. The garbage piles up in the alleyways because the trash collectors refuse to enter the zone. The air grows heavy with the sweet, cloying scent of rotting vegetables and unwashed bodies. But there is another smell, fainter, metallic, the smell of blood. You feel the itch first. A tiny, red prick on your ankle. You ignore it. It's just a flea bite. Everyone has them. But this flea is different. This flea is starving. Inside its gut, a colony of bacteria has multiplied so rapidly that it has formed a solid plug blocking the insect's stomach. The flea bites you, trying to feed, but it can't swallow. In a frenzy of starvation, it regurgitates the blood from its last meal directly into your open vein. That regurgitated blood is teeming with times Yersinia pestis asterisk. The bacteria enter your bloodstream and travel to the nearest lymph node. They begin to replicate. Your body attacks them with white blood cells. But the bacteria have a weapon, a molecular syringe that injects toxins directly into your immune cells, paralyzing them. The node swells. The bubo forms. Night falls over the quarantine district. The silence is broken only by the coughing of the sick and the frantic scuttling of claws on the wooden sidewalks. This is the moment of true sensory horror. The city officials believed that the rope and barbed wire would stop the plague. They thought the disease walked on two legs. They were wrong. The quarantine created a pressure cooker. By trapping the people, they trapped the waste. By trapping the waste, they created a paradise for the true vectors, the rats. You can hear them in the walls. Asterisk, Rattus, Norvegicus, asterisk. The brown rat. They don't care about the Geary Act. They don't care about police lines. They can squeeze their skeletons through a hole the size of a quarter. The quarantine wall acts as a sieve. It keeps the humans in, but allows the rats to pass back and forth, carrying the fleas, carrying the death. Inside the wire, the rat population explodes. They feast on the uncollected garbage. They scurry over the sleeping bodies of the quarantined families. You lie in the dark, fever spiking to 104 degrees, and you feel the weight of a rodent running across your chest. It pauses. It scratches. The fleas jump from the cooling body of a dead rat to the warm body of a living child. The rope that was meant to protect the city has turned Chinatown into an incubator. The biological reality of the plague is terrifying enough. The gangrene that turns fingers and toes charcoal black, the septic shock that causes blood vessels to burst beneath the skin, but the isolation makes it a living hell. Without access to Western medicine or even basic support, the community is left to die in the dark. The detectives outside the wire are baffled why the cases keep rising, blinded by their own bigotry, unable to see that their wall is actually feeding the fire. And now, for the twist. The relief, such as it is, comes from a man named Dr. Joseph Kinyon. He was a difficult man, rigid and stubborn. But he possessed the one thing the politicians lacked: a microscope and a belief in the germ theory of disease. He knew it wasn't the people. He suspected the rats. Modern science tells us exactly what happened. The bubonic plague is a zoonotic disease. It lives in rodent populations. When the rats die of the plague, their fleas need a new host. Humans are just collateral damage. Kinyon confirmed the presence of the bacteria. He fought the governor, the newspapers, and the business owners who wanted to deny the plague existed to protect the economy. The quarantine was eventually lifted, not because of compassion, but because a court ruled it unconstitutional, a rare victory against the Geary Act-era laws. But the lesson remains etched in the biology of the event. The ropes and barbed wire did nothing to stop the spread. In fact, bacteriological analysis suggests that by concentrating the population and failing to address the sanitation, the quarantine likely accelerated the infection rate within the district. The twist is a cold, hard biological fact. Viruses and bacteria do not obey borders. They do not respect laws. And they certainly do not care about your race. The walls we build to keep the others out usually just serve to lock the monster in with us. The rats moved freely under the barbed wire, carrying the apocalypse in their fur, proving that in the face of nature, our political divisions are not just immoral, they are medically suicidal. So the next time you hear about a containment zone or a travel ban based on fear, remember the ropes of San Francisco. Remember the sound of claws in the wall. And remember that the most dangerous accomplice to a disease is never the microbe itself. It is the ignorance of the men who try to police it.